What did humans eat every single day for 300,000 years before sugar, processed food, or even farming existed at all? The answer might completely change how you think about your own plate, your cravings, and your relationship with food. No fast food, no candy, no soda, no bread, no pasta, no breakfast cereal. Yet humans thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. So what exactly filled their stomachs, and why does understanding this matter so much for your health right now, today? Let's start with the single most important fact archaeologists have established about the prehistoric human diet across multiple continents. There was no single diet. Hunter-gatherers ate an enormous variety of foods depending entirely on their specific environment and region. Coastal groups ate fish, shellfish, and seaweed extensively, while inland groups relied heavily on large game, roots, nuts, and seasonal berries. But despite this regional diversity, several consistent patterns emerge clearly across virtually every studied hunter-gatherer population throughout human history. Anthropologist Lorraine Cordain analyzed dozens of traditional hunter-gatherer diets and found something remarkable about their nutritional composition overall. On average, hunter-gatherer diets consisted of roughly 65% plant foods and 35% animal foods, though this ratio varied dramatically by region and season. This means the popular image of prehistoric humans as purely meat-obsessed carnivores is actually a significant oversimplification of the real evidence. Gathering, primarily done by women in most studied societies, provided the majority of daily caloric intake in most documented hunter-gatherer communities. Roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, fruits, leafy greens, and wild vegetables made up the bulk of what people actually consumed on a typical day. Anthropologist Richard Lee's famous study of the Juhansi people found that gathered plant foods provided roughly 70% of their total caloric intake. The mongongo nut alone provided a significant portion of their diet, rich in protein and healthy fats, requiring no cultivation or planting whatsoever. Meat, while culturally significant and highly valued, was actually consumed less frequently than most people assume when picturing prehistoric daily life. A successful hunt might feed an entire band for several days, but hunts weren't always successful, and meat wasn't a guaranteed daily occurrence. When meat was available, virtually the entire animal was consumed, organs, marrow, fat, and all, nothing close to the lean muscle meat modern humans typically eat. Organ meats like liver, heart, and kidney were often considered the most valuable parts, packed with concentrated vitamins and minerals modern diets frequently lack. Bone marrow, extracted using stone tools, provided dense calories and healthy fats, evidenced extensively in archaeological sites showing deliberately cracked animal bones. Now let's talk about something that defined virtually every aspect of the prehistoric diet that simply doesn't exist in your modern grocery store. Seasonality. Prehistoric humans ate dramatically different foods depending on the time of year, something almost entirely absent from modern industrialized eating patterns. Spring might bring fresh greens and early fruits. Summer brought berries and abundant game. Autumn brought nuts and roots. Winter relied on stored fat and preserved meat. This constant seasonal variation provided a naturally diverse nutrient profile that modern, year-round access to identical foods simply cannot replicate in the same way. Researchers studying isotopes in ancient human bones have confirmed this seasonal dietary shifting, finding chemical signatures that change measurably throughout the year in skeletal remains. So what about sugar? This is where the contrast between prehistoric and modern diets becomes genuinely stark and scientifically significant for understanding modern health problems. Prehistoric humans had access to honey when available, seasonal fruits when ripe, and that was essentially the entire extent of concentrated sugar in their diet. Honey was prized specifically because it was rare, difficult to obtain, and seasonally limited, not something consumed daily or in large quantities by most groups. Wild fruits available to hunter-gatherers were also significantly less sweet than modern cultivated fruits, which have been selectively bred over thousands of years for sweetness. A wild apple ancestor, for example, contained dramatically less sugar than the apples sold in modern grocery stores today. After centuries of agricultural selection, compare this to modern sugar consumption, where the average person in many industrialized countries consumes well over 70 grams of added sugar daily, sometimes far more. That's roughly equivalent to consuming concentrated sugar your hunter-gatherer ancestors might have encountered only rarely, perhaps during a successful honey harvest a few times yearly. This dramatic shift matters enormously because human metabolism evolved specifically within an environment where concentrated sugar was scarce, valuable, and worth seeking out energetically. Your brain's reward system evolved to strongly crave sugar precisely because it was rare and signaled valuable, quickly available calories during times of genuine scarcity. In a modern environment where sugar is cheap, abundant, and added to nearly everything, that same evolved craving system becomes a significant liability rather than an asset. This mismatch helps explain why sugar cravings feel so powerful and difficult to resist. Your brain is responding exactly as it evolved to respond. Now, let's discuss processed food more broadly, something that represents perhaps the most dramatic departure from how humans ate for the vast majority of our existence. Every single food a hunter-gatherer consumed was, by definition, whole and unprocessed directly from a plant, animal, or fungus with minimal preparation beyond cooking. There were no preservatives, no artificial flavors, no refined oils, no high-fructose corn syrup, none of the thousands of food additives common in modern products. Food was also inherently fiber-rich, since whole plants retain their natural fiber content, unlike modern refined grains and processed foods that strip fiber away entirely. This fiber played a crucial role in regulating blood sugar, feeding beneficial gut bacteria, and creating the natural feeling of fullness that prevented overeating. Modern processed foods, by contrast, are often specifically engineered to be hyperpalatable, combining sugar, fat, and salt in ratios that don't occur naturally anywhere. Food scientists call this engineering the bliss point, a precisely calculated combination that maximizes craving and consumption beyond what natural whole foods typically trigger. Your hunter-gatherer ancestors never encountered anything engineered this way. Hence chances. Their food satisfaction signals evolved within an environment of naturally limited, whole food options only. Let's talk about what archaeologists call dental evidence, because teeth tell an incredibly detailed story about ancient human diets that bones alone cannot reveal. Pre-agricultural human skeletons consistently show remarkably few cavities compared to populations after the introduction of farming, and especially after the introduction of refined sugar. Anthropologists examining teeth from hunter-gatherer populations found cavity rates often below 2%, dramatically lower than rates seen in modern industrialized populations consuming processed sugar regularly. This isn't because ancient humans had superior dental hygiene. They had essentially none compared to modern toothbrushing and dental care routines available today. The dramatic difference comes almost entirely from diet, specifically the near-complete absence of concentrated sugars that feed the bacteria responsible for tooth decay and cavities. When agriculture introduced grain-heavy diets roughly 10,000 years ago, cavity rates increased measurably, and they increased again dramatically with industrial sugar production centuries later. Now, let's address a common question people often ask when learning about prehistoric diets. Were hunter-gatherers ever malnourished or genuinely struggling to find enough food? The evidence here is nuanced and worth understanding carefully, because the answer isn't a simple universal yes or no across all studied populations and regions. Some hunter-gatherer groups in particularly harsh environments did face periodic food scarcity, especially during difficult seasons or unpredictable environmental conditions beyond their control. However, skeletal evidence consistently shows that pre-agricultural humans were generally taller, had stronger bones, and showed fewer signs of nutritional deficiency than early farmers. This seems counterintuitive at first. Farming should theoretically provide more reliable, abundant food. Yet the skeletal evidence tells a remarkably consistent story across regions. The explanation lies in dietary diversity. Hunter-gatherers ate dozens or even hundreds of different food sources, providing a broad spectrum of vitamins and minerals naturally. Early farmers, by contrast, often relied heavily on just one or two staple crops, like wheat or corn, creating significant nutritional gaps despite having more total calories. This is sometimes called the agricultural paradox: more calories and more reliable food supply, yet often worse overall nutritional health compared to diverse hunter-gatherer diets. So what does all this mean for understanding your own relationship with food in the modern world we actually live in today? Your digestive system, your metabolism, your taste preferences, and your hunger signals all evolved within this ancient dietary context over hundreds of thousands of years. Modern nutrition science increasingly recognizes this evolutionary mismatch, leading to growing interest in dietary approaches that attempt to recreate elements of ancestral eating patterns more closely. This doesn't mean you need to literally hunt your own meat or forage for wild plants. That's neither practical nor necessary for most modern people today. But understanding the ancestral pattern offers valuable insight. Prioritizing whole foods, embracing dietary diversity, and dramatically reducing added sugar and heavily processed ingredients where possible. Researchers studying modern populations who maintain more traditional, whole food-based diets consistently find lower rates of metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes and obesity. The Katavan people of Papua New Guinea, studied extensively by researchers, maintain a largely traditional diet and show remarkably low rates of modern metabolic disease. Despite consuming significant carbohydrates from root vegetables and fruit, the Kitavans show none of the obesity or diabetes rates common in industrialized nations today. Researchers attribute this largely to the complete absence of processed foods and refined sugar, rather than any specific macronutrient ratio being inherently superior. This suggests something important. The specific ratio of fats to carbohydrates may matter less than the overall quality, processing level, and diversity of foods consumed. Whole, unprocessed foods, regardless of whether they're primarily plant or animal-based, appear to support better metabolic health than heavily processed alternatives in virtually every study. Let's also address physical activity. Because prehistoric eating patterns weren't separate from movement, they were deeply intertwined with daily physical exertion in ways modern eating rarely is. Hunter-gatherers expended significant energy obtaining their food, walking, digging, climbing, and carrying, creating a natural balance between caloric intake and caloric expenditure throughout each day. Modern food, by contrast, requires minimal physical effort to obtain, often just a short drive and a few minutes of walking through a store. This disconnect between effortless food acquisition and our evolved expectation of earning calories through physical activity represents another significant piece of the modern dietary puzzle. Some researchers argue this contributes to overconsumption. Our bodies evolved expecting food acquisition to require physical effort that modern convenience has almost entirely eliminated. So where does this leave practical takeaways for someone living in the modern world, surrounded by convenience foods and abundant, inexpensive sugar everywhere they look? Prioritizing whole, unprocessed foods whenever realistically possible aligns closely with how human metabolism evolved to function over hundreds of thousands of years of selection. Eating a genuinely diverse range of plant foods, rather than relying on just a few staple crops, mirrors the nutritional diversity that supported ancestral health. Being mindful of added sugar, recognizing it as something your brain evolved to crave intensely precisely because it was naturally rare, can help inform better choices. Understanding that your cravings aren't a personal failing, but rather an ancient survival mechanism responding to an environment radically different from the one it evolved within. This reframe matters significantly. Struggling with modern food temptation isn't a character flaw. It's your ancient brain responding logically to an unprecedented nutritional environment. Your ancestors never had to resist a vending machine, a fast food drive-thru, or an endless supply of soda. Their environment simply didn't present these challenges. Modern willpower struggles around food often reflect this profound environmental mismatch rather than any genuine personal weakness or lack of discipline on your part. Some nutrition researchers and clinicians now explicitly incorporate this evolutionary framework into dietary counseling, helping people understand cravings within their proper biological and historical context. This understanding doesn't make healthy eating effortless, but it can transform the internal narrative from self-blame into something more accurate, compassionate, and ultimately more sustainable. For roughly 300,000 years, humans ate an extraordinarily diverse, naturally whole food diet shaped entirely by their immediate environment and the changing seasons around them. No sugar aisles, No drive-thrus, no engineered hyper-palatable snacks, just whatever the land, water, and seasons provided through direct physical effort and patient gathering. Understanding this deep history doesn't require abandoning modern life entirely, but it does offer a powerful lens for understanding why certain modern foods feel so irresistible. Your body isn't broken when it struggles against constant sugar and processed food exposure. It's responding exactly as it evolved to respond across hundreds of millennia. The path forward likely isn't perfect ancestral replication, but thoughtful reduction of processed foods, genuine dietary diversity, and renewed appreciation for the whole foods your body still expects.